Okay, thanks for joining us again. We're going to do the same presentation I did earlier and uploaded to YouTube. Heard that we had some issues with the volume, so what we're going to do is we're going to do that same presentation on business continuation. And we have a lot of things going on right now with the coronavirus and businesses being at risk, and we want to be a resource for you in order that you're best able to continue your business. And if you're watching this and you say, well, I don't own a business, well, maybe you can listen to this video and maybe you can take this back to your employer, especially if you work for a small business, because what we're going to be talking about today, we're going to be talking about small businesses and what provisions are available for small businesses to be able to continue their business over the next as we get through this coronavirus. And guess what, everybody? We're going to get through this coronavirus situation. We're going to get through our isolation. We're going to get through our quarantines. We're going to get through it. And we need to be ready. We need to be prepared. We need to launch our businesses and launch our lives as soon as we can, because everybody will be better off. Our healthcare system will be better off. Our economy will be better off. Our spirit as Americans will be better off. And I'm going to show you some at least economic tools that Congress passed. Congress just passed the largest bill in the history of Congress, and a lot of it is focused in on small businesses and making sure that people can get back to work, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So, we're talking about business continuation. What are we talking about? Most businesses right now are suffering from a lack of income, a lack of capital, and a lack of money. So where are we going to be able to get some of that money right now? Well, we're going to talk about the CARES Act. That was passed on Friday, March 27th. The president signed it right into law. And we're going to talk about the Small Business Administration provisions that are in that act. So CARES Act, SBA, lots of money available for small businesses so employees can get paychecks, so small business owners can keep their businesses up and running. And again, as soon as we get through this isolation, as soon as we get through this quarantine, as soon as these, quote, non-essential businesses are allowed to be essential, and between you and me, every business is essential. Every business is life-sustaining. If you put your life into a business and you started it, or you're working for somebody who did that, guess what? That's life-sustaining. That's income-sustaining. That's spirit-sustaining. It's important, and we're going to help you get back to work. At least get you some ways that can help you get back to work. So there are essentially three programs that I'm going to talk about today. We're going to spend most of the time on, number one, Paycheck Protection Loans. Those are SBA loans. We're going to get into what they are, how much you can get, and guess what? We're also going to talk a little bit about a neat feature of this program, which is the federal government will allow your lender to forgive a great portion of that loan. So tune in, stay in on this. It's very important that we understand that whole program and how it's going to be able to keep your business in business when we come out of this coronavirus quarantine. Very important. And there are things you can do now, you can do from home. We live in the best time ever to operate a business. And when I say that, we are just coming off one of the largest periods of economic expansion. We have technology. We have technology that allows me to broadcast from my basement and talk to you about legislation. I was able to find the day the president signed a piece of legislation, download it, analyze it, and be ready this past weekend to talk to clients about it. Could we have done that 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago? Probably not. So get ready. There's a lot of stuff you're going to be able to do from home, especially if you're watching a video like this. There's IDL Grants, Economic Injury Disaster Loans. This is a program for, as it implies, disasters that cause economic injuries to small businesses. Usually it's a loan problem. We're going to talk loan program. We're going to talk about a grant, actual grant money that's going to be available to you for your small business as a short-term fix to get capital right injected into your business. Last we're going to talk about is there's some loan subsidies. So Paycheck Protection Loans, EIDL grants, and loan subsidies. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's dive right into it. So first, I have a little problem with my chart here. Paycheck Protection Loans. Who is available? Who's eligible to receive one of these Paycheck Protection Loans? Well, we see that if your business has less than 500 employees, you're going to be eligible. If you're self-employed or a contractor, you're also going to be eligible for some of these loans too. Now, the amounts all vary, and we'll get into how you calculate the amounts, but if you're self-employed, don't say, well, I'm not usually able to get any type of public benefits. You're probably going to be able to qualify for some kind of relief under this Paycheck Protection Loan Program. And also, if you operate a nonprofit, nonprofits are also considered businesses under the Small Business Administration Loan Program. So Paycheck Protection Loans. So what are we talking about when we're talking about Paycheck Protection Loans? Well, everybody wants to know the big question. Well, how much? How much are we talking about? Well, we've got 2.5 times, and that's multiplied times, your average monthly payroll in the preceding year. So we'll take 12 months of your payroll as a business, average that out. So whatever that payroll was over the course of the year, we're going to average that out to get a monthly payroll. And it's payroll expense is how it's defined. And we'll talk a little bit about how payroll expense is defined. But it's 2.5 times that monthly payroll is how much you can borrow from the federal government in order to get your small businesses running. It's going to be subject to some limitations, of course. But when we're talking about what goes into it, we're talking about the wages, your salaries, your anything type of monetary compensation that you gave your employees that went through payroll. We're also talking about the income to the owners to some extent. Again, regulations are coming out, but you have to take a look at that very carefully. We're also talking about health insurance benefits that the employer has picked up. We're talking about the employer side of certain state and local taxes. We're not talking about the FICA taxes. There's a whole different universe of subsidies regarding payroll tax subsidies that every employer pays. That's the employer side of that Social Security deduction that you get whenever you get your payroll, your paycheck. So we've got all those things. You're also talking about retirement benefits. You're also talking about if you have separation or termination benefits that are being paid. All of these things, and again, we're going to want to work with professionals in order to calculate that, but it's not just the wages on your payroll. It's a universe of things that goes into calculating what ultimately was employee compensation for running your business and for people working for you. And again, we want to get that money into your hands so you can get that into employees' hands, so you can get that working for you and keep that business running, because that's ultimately going to be extraordinarily important for us to have a strong economy, to have strong local communities, for our fabric of our society to come back together. We need to be back to work, and this bill is supposed to do that. So what can you do? What can you use this money for? Well, you can use it for payroll. So if you have payroll obligations and they have what's called the covered period. The covered period is from February 15th, when a lot of this stuff started to break down in the United States, all the way through June 30th. So if you have payroll expenses that were incurred through February 15th or paid out anywhere after that through June 30th, it counts. If your business owns mortgage on real property, the interest portion can be used for these for these loan proceeds. You have rent. If you pay rent, you can use the loan proceeds. Also, utilities. Now, utilities, very broad. We're talking about what we think about when we think about a utility, the electric bill, when you think about the phone bill. But we're also talking about cell phone bills, internet bills, water. There's even a provision for transportation costs to some extent. Again, we're going to have to dive into this, but it gives you an idea of the universe of things that you're going to be able to spend money on in order to keep your business up and running. Essentially, the way I like to talk about this bill is designed to make sure that you have a facility to go to and make sure that you have people that you can pay in order to get your business jump-started and up and running, because a lot of us are not just not allowed to work, and we're experiencing a huge economic injury because of this coronavirus, and because in a lot of cases our governmental institutions are telling us that we can't operate our businesses, or we can't work, or you can't go to work, and it becomes, becomes very, very difficult for these businesses. We want to get it up and running, and these are some of the things that you could use that 2.5 times monthly payroll, that loan, to spend as long as these expenses were incurred between February 15th and June 30th. So if we move on, well, if we're doing what's called a loan, and Don, I hear you guys saying out there, hey, Don, we're talking about a loan here. If there's a loan, we got to pay it back. There must be some terms. And yes, the statute does talk about the terms of this loan. It also talks about the underwriting, and we'll address that in a little bit. How do you actually qualify for the loan? How do you actually get the money? So we look at it, we talk about the maximum term is 10 years. So if you borrow the money, the day you get the money, you have 10 years to pay it back. Interest rate on the money, maximum of 4%. So 4% is pretty good rate, interest rate if you're borrowing money. And you're going to find out this is an unsecured loan. It's kind of like a credit card. You don't have to put up collateral. We'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later on. But we have a 4% rate on, and ultimately what can be as long as a 10 years to pay the loan back. And you don't have to make payments for the first 6 months. Again, very generous terms here as far as how you have to pay that loan back. I've mentioned that we're going to have to talk about underwriting. Well, on the underwriting side, there's no collateral. You don't have to put up real estate. You don't have to put up equipment. You don't have to put up your receivables. You don't have to put up any collateral. No personal guarantee. And employees, a lot of times if you're working for an entrepreneur, a business owner, a lot of times that business owner, and business owners, you know this right now, they've signed their personal assets away. Their personal wealth is at stake and is tied to the success of that business. With this particular loan, the business owner does not have to offer a personal guarantee. They don't have to offer any personal collateral or any business collateral. One thing to make sure of, though, Congress has passed a lot of laws in the last month or so, all designed to kickstart our economy. Some of them involve tax credits for paying sick leave and tax credits for keeping people on payroll. There's a whole universe, and it's way far outside of the scope of today's video. We might try to address it a little bit later on, but what's very important to understand is that you might not qualify for all of the tax credits. So it's very, very important when you're deciding which program to get into in order to kickstart your business, in order to get that business back up and running. You got to make sure that you get good professional advice that tells you, hey, I want to be in the tax credit program. I don't want to be in the loan program. Or I want to be in the loan program, but not the tax credit program. A lot of things are going to go into that. Your cash flow, your ability to pay monies back, your ability to weather the storm, to wait for a refund of tax credits. There's a whole bunch of items that you're going to have to consult your professionals, look at your cash flow, and most importantly, as a business owner, as an employee, you know your business. So let that experience guide you. So, what's really exciting about this program for a lot of business owners, I told you this is about kickstarting your economy, about getting the economy up and running. This isn't about burdening business owners with a bunch of debt because they experienced an economic injury. And in large part, it's brought on by our government saying, hey, we need you to stay out of work. We need you to be quarantined. We need you to shut your business down. We need you to shut your retail establishment down. We need to shut your customers down so you don't have businesses, even business and sales, even if you are an essential business. So we really need to understand that federal government is looking to get this money in people's hands to prime the pump. So they're looking to forgive a whole big part of this loan. Really, really exciting that they're going to forgive a big part of this loan, but only if you spend it properly. And the government has decided how we should spend this money in order for it to be forgiven. So we look at if you spent or incurred these expenses between February 15th, 2020, and June 30th, 2020 for payroll. We talked about payroll expense, rent, utilities, or mortgage interest. Now, this isn't the interest on your pre-existing debt. That might qualify as an expense that you can use it on, but it doesn't qualify as a portion for loan forgiveness. I'm not sure if that was an oversight in drafting the statute. I'm not sure how that comes in, but these items are definitely items that will be forgiven. So what you would do is you would say, okay, Mr. Banker that lent me this money, I spent so much on payroll, so much on rent, so much on utilities, so much on interest. You have to prove that you did it. You have to give them schedules, all sorts of backup information. Bankers like that, federal regulators like that. But once the banker is satisfied, once your lender is satisfied that yes, you did spend it on all these qualified expenses, then in that case, that portion of the loan will be forgiven. Anything you don't pay will then be amortized and you'll have to pay back according to the terms we talked about earlier with that 4% interest rate. Very, very exciting program that you could potentially get a whole bunch of free money. And all right, nothing's free, I know. We're paying it with our tax dollars. The Federal Reserve printing press is working overtime right now. There's going to be a societal cost to pay for it. But for right now, in the short term, in order to get people working again, this is a good way for that to happen. It's the law, and it's something that we can all take advantage of if you own a small business. And today, we're talking about small business loans, Paycheck Protection Loans, authorized by the CARES Act that Congress passed on March 27th of this year. So this forgiveness program for payroll, rent, utilities, and interest on mortgages could be a very, very valuable program. So, what kind of limits do we have on it? Because, again, they want you to keep people working as an employer. As an employee, we want you to get back to work or keep working. So what do we have here? We have, if the employer reduces their staff from a year ago, so if you had a head count of 50 and now your head count is 48, you're going to only get a percentage of your loan forgiven. So all these expenses we talked about that are potentially forgivable, we're going to lift that up. But if you only have 96% of your staff on board still, we'll only forgive 96% of the loan. Again, we're trying to encourage people to have their payrolls where they were a year ago. The number of full-time employees is the way that that is measured by. We're also deducting it for wage reductions. And when we say wage reductions, we're saying if there's somebody who's making under $100,000, they were making under $100,000 and their wages were reduced by more than 25% from the previous period that we're comparing it against, well, then there's going to be a dollar for each employee reduction in the amount of loan forgiveness. So these are two things that are going to reduce the amount of loan forgiveness we talked about. It's maintaining your payroll, the number of full-time employees that you had from a previous period a year ago, or not reducing salaries. Now, a lot of you guys, you're working and you've got tipped employees. Can I pay my tipped employees? The statute has a very, very specific provision that says that if you pay tipped employees, that counts as wages. What doesn't count as wages, though, towards that loan amount, which I should have mentioned earlier, is that any amounts over $100,000 that you pay. So any amounts, $100,000 is really a wage threshold under this law. So if you have salary that's over $100,000, it doesn't count towards the loan amount. And if you pay over $100,000 prorated over the year as part of those forgivable debts, the amount that's prorated that would be attributable to a salary over $100,000 is not forgiven either. So this is really to try to get the rank and file workers in your company, to get them money right in their hands. This isn't to get managers big bonuses. This isn't to get shareholders big bonuses. This is to get people working. I can't say that enough times today. So What if I furloughed people? What if I had a restaurant and now my restaurant's out of business and I furloughed everybody? Well, you have until June 30th, 2020 to get people back up and running. So if your payroll is back up and running by June 30th, if you had a reduction in staff, if you furloughed people, you can actually still qualify for 100% of the loan forgiveness. What you have to do is certify it under oath. You certify under oath that your payroll and everything that you submit is correct to the lender, that you actually spent the expenses, that the backup that you're presenting the lender is true and correct, and then the lender will evaluate that and make a recommendation for loan forgiveness for you. So really, really important. Now we're going to talk about our second program. So we just talked about Paycheck Protection Loans, and under the CARES Act, for people who are just joining us, we wanted to go through three different types of programs. One is the Paycheck Protection Loan. The second we're about to talk about is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, and the third will be loan subsidies. So for those of you who are watching that just said, wow, he took a long time to talk about that first program. Yeah, I did, because there's a lot of information there. A little bit less information on these, so we should be able to wrap up pretty soon for those of you who are getting a little bit impatient, and I understand. So, Economic Injury Disaster Loan. What the heck is that? Well, as you might expect, if you received an economic injury due to a disaster, and coronavirus, COVID-19, whatever you want to call it, is a disaster right now declared by the president and declared by many governors in many states, you can qualify for one of these loans. But they've modified that program, which has a long, long history, for a lot of different things. First of all, you qualify if you have a business that's 500 or less people. So again, small businesses we're talking about. We're not talking about giant worldwide mega corporations. We're talking about employers that have 500 employees or less. And we're talking about anybody who was operating on January 31st, 2020. So if you started work in February and you shut down in March, you're not going to qualify for one of these loans, and you're not going to qualify for one of the grants that we're just about to talk about. But otherwise, 500 employees or less and operating on January 31st, you can qualify for an economic injury disaster loan. So what's going on here? Well, you can get up to $10,000 within 3 days of your application being approved. $10,000, 3 days. Not going to see too many programs like that anywhere in the lending world, anywhere in the small business world. This is designed that because of this economic injury, because we have a disaster, we want to get money into people's hands as quickly as possible so that what? Yeah, so they can keep people employed, so they can get their businesses up and running. Think of it kind of as an advance if you're going to take out a Paycheck Protection Loan or use one of the other programs. So how are we going to do it? We're going to go to SBA.gov. SBA.gov, that site has a link on its page, and on that page you can fill out your application. You can put in all the information, and you will, as the business owner, self-certify. They're going to rely on your certification that you had an economic injury due to the coronavirus. They're going to rely on that certification. Now, you have to certify under oath, again, under oath, that you're telling the truth, that you need this money to keep your business running. But there's not going to be any additional underwriting in order to get this. Now, there is some programs to pay this back. So if you apply for a Paycheck Protection Loan, which was all of this portion of it, you apply for a Paycheck Protection Loan, we're going to treat the $10,000 advance or whatever you advanced under this 3-day program. They're going to treat that as a refinance and deduct it from the total amount that you're owed under the Paycheck Protection Loan. There's some other ways that $10,000 may be taken out of other SBA programs, but suffice it to say that if you're turned down for any reason from any other SBA program, that loan is going to be forgiven. So this is potentially just a $10,000 grant to help you get your business up and running, or if you're an employee, to help your employer get this business up and running. And I would really encourage you employees that if you don't know that your employer is engaged on this kind of thing, or your employer is so worried about just trying to keep the business running, they haven't been paying attention to these programs, but you're doing this for you, take the information to your employer, let the employer know. And here's another thing, if there's anything on here that has comments or questions, send me a direct message on Facebook. Don Petrille, you can find me on Facebook. Make a comment on the YouTube channel, make a comment on the Facebook post. We're going to post this on LinkedIn as well. Make a comment there. Direct message me. We'll do everything we can in order to make sure that we answer your questions or we get you the right professional to answer those questions. So that's a really important program. The last program we're going to talk about today are loan subsidies. So small business owners, out there, raise your hand if you have an SBA loan. I'm going to guess that a lot of you are raising your hands right now. A lot of these SBA loans right now, you're worried about having to pay back your principal, pay back your interest, make that monthly payment right now when you don't have any revenue coming in. The SBA has, part of the CARES Act, authority now to pay 6 months of principal and interest of your SBA loan. That's right. You can apply and get up to 6 months of your SBA loan paid for by the SBA under this program. Never happened that I'm aware of in the history of in the history of the SBA. So this is a really, really powerful tool for you to keep your business up and running and buy yourself some time. One question that we did have the first time we tried this video was, well, my SBA loan's already in deferment. Well, what they said was if you're in deferment and you're already deferred some payments, you don't have to make some payments right now, we'll give you an extra 6 months. So whenever that first payment was supposed to start after the deferment, we'll give you 6 more months. Again, very, very powerful program that we're going to be able to use in order to buy you time, in order to get that financing, in order to get your operations up, in order to get your sales up, in order to get your employees humming again. So we can get this economy rolling and we can be the strong country that we are definitely, absolutely, 100% capable of being. So, in conclusion, make sure that you're informed. There are a lot of other aspects of this CARES Act, of the Families First Coronavirus Act. There are tax credits, there are tax subsidies, there's sick leave provisions. There's a whole bunch of information that we haven't covered yet. We may cover in a future video. We may do some blog entries. Just make sure that you're informed. Make sure you're asking the correct questions. It's very, very important. And lastly, I want to close. Make sure you're staying safe. Staying safe is the ultimate thing. If you don't have your health, if you don't have your employees' health, if you're not taking care of yourself, your families, first of all, we don't have anything to work for. And of course, obviously, we can't work the way that we want to. So again, if this was interesting, share it with a friend. Share it with somebody you know who owns a small business. Share it with a neighbor who might work for a small business to make sure that they know that there are programs available to keep our economy running, to keep small business, which is 100% the backbone of this economy. It's where innovation occurs. It is where Main Street values, hard work all comes together, where the American dream is forged is with small business. And I want to thank everybody who runs a small business, who works for a small business, for everything that you do. And I can't wait to be back there working with you when this whole crisis is over. So thank you very much. Share the video. Make some comments if you think it's useful. And thank you very much for watching.